Welcome to 20 Minutes with 2020 Mendocino. This is episode 15, and this week we will be starting a series on autoflowers called Mythbusters, the Autoflowers edition, Facts, Fiction, Propaganda, and Truth. I am joined today by my co-host and founder of 2020, Adam. Adam, how are you doing?
Doing good, Carlos. Thanks.
So we have been tentatively working on our Autoflower program for almost 2 years now, and we are finally getting ready to launch this year. Adam, do you want to give any information on the Autoflower drops that we have coming in January?
Yeah, sure. So we're excited to finally do a triple strain release here, which will be one of our CBD rich strains. We call it Vitamins, and that is a Mendo cookies crossed with Remedy. It's a CBD dominant, really frosty, really citrusy, fruity, purple. It's a beautiful flower and looks, and great daytime smoke. It tests about between 2 to 10% THC, and then about 2 to 10% CBD. So they vary, but we consider it a 1-to-1, but that's more or less an average. And then we've got the Tricks, which is a triangle kush, and it's a really fast autoflower, kind of a traditional ultra fast, somewhat short, and really big nugs, really frosty, 20% plus potency. It's got the gassy kush nose that definitely carried that gene pretty well. And then the last one is the Durban Sunrise, which was derived from our orange Durban and double Durban, but it actually somewhat swayed away from that really citrusy Durban-y smell, although it's still there. It just picked up a little more of a earthy kind of dankness too with it. But it also brought a purple color in that we sort of bred into it on purpose after we noticed it after the second generation. And so that's where it got its name. It has a real pretty pink and purple colors to it, and it's really nice smoke, and it's about an 80-day. It's kind of an average for us, maybe 85-day autoflower. So that's the new drops.
Right on. Now, before we get into the meat and bones of this episode, we also want to announce and give a little bit of information on our rendition of Free the Seeds this year, which we are calling the Great American Auto Race. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so as maybe some of you know, we do a Free the Seeds event. We call it every year. It's usually around the first of the year. The last couple of years was right around January 1st. This year we weren't quite prepared for that time, but we were shooting for a release date of Valentine's Day, February 14th. And this time it's going to be with autoflowers. So we call it the Great American Auto Race. It's not actually a race, but we called it that because we're going to be trying to get 2 seeds of 2 different strains into every participant's hands, and they can kind of race the strains against each other. So it's just all for fun. There's no contest involved. We may throw some photo contest in at the end where we, give away some swag or something, but the whole event's just for fun, just for the community, to bring people together. No competition, hopefully no haters and trolls, but those people tend to come out no matter what, but we're trying to avoid that. And yeah, it's low obligation. So the last 2 years we did absolutely free, completely free shipping, free everything. We just signed up on a list and you got seeds in the mail. However, we couldn't afford to continue that with using actual packaging because we were basically sending them in envelopes, and a lot of them were getting smashed. And so we had a heck of a lot of returns and, upset people or whatnot. And so this year we've teamed up with 4 different seed banks, and they are willing to do the shipping and do the orders, which are still going to be free. However, they're going to charge just shipping, and I've made that's part of the obligation. Like, there's no profit or anything involved. In fact, I mean, they're going to be paying for the packaging and everything. So you're talking $3-4, and you can order them from one of 4 seed banks. And I can tell you those are our sponsors. That is United Seed Bank, Great Lakes Genetics, Neptune Seed Bank, and Baked Beans Cannabis Seeds. So those are the 4 that have joined our cause, and we're really excited. I'm really happy that they were all into doing this, because it is kind of a little bit of a hassle, and you have a lot of people signing up, um, but they have the infrastructure for it a lot more than us. And hopefully people will buy some seeds too and support the seed banks as well. Those guys do a lot for the community as well, and it's not all fun and games. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's the event. And then hopefully we'll have some posts. We're also hosting, if phenohunter.org is one of the sites that's going to host a bulletin. So that'll be one of the places to get information. And then I guess that brings up the last point, is that in order to get in on these drops, we're not announcing them until kind of the last minute. We'll probably do about 24-hour notice. And the only way to get that notice is either from an email by joining our race on our website. So you go to
Actually, I just want to let everybody know that if you go on our Instagram, there's a direct link to the Great American Auto Race there as well before you announce the website. I just want to give a heads up.
Okay, so yep, so there's a few ways to get to that. One's through the Instagram account, and then the other's to go directly to our website, which is 2020mendocino.com/autoflowers. And then at the top of the page, it says join the, click here for the American Auto Race. So you can join from that. Or if you want to stay tuned to phenohunter.org and go on the main page, there's a bulletin announcement for the auto race. And as long as you're keeping track of that, we will be making the announcements there as well. But we do encourage people to do both and sign up for the email, because we'll be doing the updates for every drop. And I think we have enough to get everybody satisfied. So far, we've had a lot of signups, but we're planning on releasing more seeds than we have signups at the moment. So as long as everyone's following along and basically reading the simple directions, then they're going to be able to join this, and it should be fun. Hope that very few rules. One of them is basically please don't sign up more than once just to try to get extra packs of seeds. We want to get as many people involved as possible. And I mean, we'll be policing that a little bit. Obviously, it's kind of self-policed, and I certainly just hope people will be respectful about that. Very, very little thing to ask, and there's not a lot of rules beyond that. So be nice to people, and no haters and no trolls, and it's about it. So you can save your seeds for outdoor if you want. There's nothing, no obligations. So
if you want to preview on the drops that are happening in January, however, which can I confirm that those will not be part of the auto race?
I don't think the first 3 that I mentioned will be part of the auto race, but we've got a whole lot of other fun stuff coming right behind that will be.
So if you want a preview of the first 3, I encourage everybody to check out our new Instagram account, 2020 Autoflowers. So just give that a follow, and you can check out all the photos of all the drops there too.
Yep, and we'll be posting the new drop on the website itself as well, really soon, the next week.
Right on. So let's move into the meat and bones of this episode. We are calling it Mythbusters. So that's gonna bring a lot of topics in there: facts, fiction, propaganda, and truth. So I'll begin with the first question. Can you give us a brief overview on the definition of autoflowers and what makes them different from photo periods?
Yeah, certainly. So let's just start with a little background info. So the technical term for an autoflowering plant is in the botany world is called a day neutral plant. So it's a plant that flowers regardless of the light cycle. It flowers based on the size of the plant itself and the genetics inside the plant that basically determine that it has reached a point in its life that it needs to flower. So it could flower at 24 hours of light, or it could flower at 6 hours of light. And the photo periods that we grow are actually technically called short day photoperiod dependent plants. There's also long day plants, which are most of the vegetable plants in our garden, tomatoes and whatnot are long day. So long day tend to flower over 12 hours of light, and short day plants start flowering under 24 hours of light, or I'm sorry, 12 hours of light. So, to break that all down, basically what you've got with an autoflower is a plant that is a cannabis plant that will flower no matter what the day cycle is. Now, I want to throw in a few nomenclature things real quick. A lot of people get a little huffy about using the word autoflower because it's technically referred to as autoflowering for proper English. And the word autoflower has been embraced by the community, and we're going to kind of stick with that it's just easier to say, and it's a little bit shorter. Sorry if we get anybody offended about that. And then we'll even go as far as to just call them autos. So if we refer to them as autos, and that's just a way to make it short and simple, and you're going to know what we're talking about. And as far as the photo period, same thing. Again, technically it's a short day photo period dependent plant, but we're going to call it photos or maybe photo periods. So that's just a little background nomenclature for the rest of the talk. And in final, if most of you probably know this, but autoflower plants descend from Cannabis ruderalis, which is a subspecies from northern hemisphere areas, I believe Siberia or northern Asia, that has basically adapted to flower in under adverse conditions and poor climates with very short summers and cold falls and uh, adverse conditions in both light and temperature.
Now, can we briefly talk about what got 2020 into breeding autoflowers, and did you or anybody on the team have any anti-autoflower bias before you embraced them, and why?
Yeah, so absolutely. I can humbly admit that I was very anti-autoflower for multiple reasons. For one thing is, as a breeder back in the day, that was a trait that we did everything we could to actually work out of plants. And occasionally it would surface in some of our genetics, and it was something we would breed out of it because basically we couldn't take clones of it and we couldn't mother them. And they basically just they didn't really mesh with the style of breeding we were doing or even growing. And so that really is how I formed my first anti-autoflower bias was many years ago with those sort of issues. My second anti-autoflower bias came from uh, the kind of the mass boom of people growing them locally, and they were getting basically pretty poor quality autoflower seeds from Europe, and they were essentially the ruderalis, and it was just really poor quality. So now, how did I become to embrace them? Well, that's actually a kind of a good story. I was on an airplane in an airport headed to Alaska, and I was sitting in the terminal, and a guy kind of humbly came up to me and was like, "Excuse me, do you mind like if I talk to you for a minute?" I'm like, yeah. And he's like, "I see your shirt. It says 2020 on it. Is that the seed company?" I said, "Yeah, it is." And he's like, "Well, I'd like to talk to you about seeds if you got a few minutes." And I didn't have much time because the plane was about to board. But in the long story short, we ended up moving our conversation to an email. And the gentleman lived in Homer, Alaska, and he had some neurological issues and needed CBD flower, and he didn't have a lot of money and didn't want to grow indoor, didn't need a lot of flower, and he needed CBD autoflowers, like high CBD, but he wanted THC as well. So um, and kind of somewhat argumentatively told him, "Well, I think you can pull it off with photos." And he's like, "No, you absolutely can't. I know this. Like, there's some grow stores in town, and There's the locals. Everyone tells me in Homer you will not be able to do it without pulling tarps and light dep and all that. I mean, this guy's looking for a couple of plants for a year, and so that really kind of started me on it. So I got home and started. I ordered some autoflower seeds from some random companies to test them and to see, kind of just test the waters, and that's really where it all started.
Oh, I remember our conversation. I kind of imagined people's grandmothers in Florida on their balconies growing some autos. That was kind of my view on that. And also people with lower mobility, some veterans that have come across our tables before and asked us for smaller, easier to work with plants. People who can't pull tarp or who can't afford to build rooms.
Yes, for sure.
Why are many other people, in your opinion, biased against autoflowers? I know we discussed briefly you cannot clone them and you can't mother them, and I know that for many growers, even if they decided to start a bunch in a room, canopy control is damn near impossible. Are there any other anti-autoflower bias that you're aware of?
Well, I kind of touched the surface of that a little bit, but for one thing, just the quality has improved so much in the last 5 years, even. And and high regards to some of these pioneers, who Mephisto and I'm sure there's a lot of other companies, and a lot of these guys on the forums that have really been like working with autos for a long time, and props to them because they've helped really like bring them to the surface and work those lines and actually brought some quality into it. So I think a lot of it's just the same bias that I had that hasn't been dropped yet. And then I kind of mentioned there was a kind of a huge load of autoflower seeds at one point about 3 years ago that made it up to the Emerald Triangle, uh, kind of during one of our major weed depressions here that we had with the cannabis price drop and everything. And boy, I mean, it was just a lot of really like mass-produced, poor quality Spanish and Netherlands autoflowers that were probably made indoors completely, had never been grown outdoors, never tested outside. Um, and so they seriously flopped. And then that turned a lot of outdoor growers locally around here against them, because they just had such bad luck, and with all sorts of issues from hermaphrodites to uh, to males in the feminized plants to just ultra low potency and poor quality. And then lastly, I mean, I just kind of equate it to change. It's like the flat earth society type people that they just don't embrace change, and they hear, they have their little groups of people that are just against things. They don't like new stuff. And not to ruffle feathers, but I see it similar with the feminized seed, the anti-feminized seed people. I mean, it's most of the anti-feminized seed propaganda out there is just that. It's just not true. So we actually talked about that in the last episode. So go ahead and listen to our last episode if you want to hear me talk about that issue.
All right, so let's get into the true and false segment of the show. I'm going to ask you a few brief questions, and you can respond with fact or fiction and a short answer. Let's see where we can begin. Fact or fiction? Do autoflowers yield more than photo periods?
So that's a good question, and the answer is yes and no. Um, so there's a few reasons I say that, but um, one thing you have to understand is that an autoflower plant still follows the same like physiology, has the same physiology as a photo period plant. So they have an appearance of yielding more in some cases because a lot of times they're single stalked plants. They're basically like putting a clone in a healthy clone in soil or in hydroponic and putting it right into flower instantly. And we used to do this, and I mean, they basically grew a lot like what, a lot of modern or autoflowers that you see pictures of and stuff look like. And that's because they essentially were the same thing. I mean, they were photo period plants, but they were just in flower from day one. Um, so the other thing is that a lot of people don't grow autoflowers the same, in that they grow maybe 6 plants in a tent, and then they end up having a pretty high yield per plant. But the canopy, it's not the same style of growing if you're a commercial grower and you're just trying to fill a canopy completely full. So in that case, your per plant yield is going to be lower. But what I always tell people, what it comes down to with yield, it has nothing to do with per plant. Absolutely nothing. I don't care if your plant pulled a pound or if it pulled, a half an ounce or a quarter ounce. It's what your yield is a measure of the amount of square footage and light, if you have light, or out if you're doing outdoor. So it's all a matter of square footage. How much did you pull per square foot, not per plant? So that's why I give the answer of yes and no. But it's definitely not an across the board yes, autoflowers yield more than photoperiods. It's just not true. And that's one of the sort of propaganda from the autoflower community that I'll push back against time and time again if I have to.
Okay. Next question: true or false, or you can elaborate, I guess, more in depth. In your experience, are autoflowers more pest and disease resistant than photoperiods?
Okay, so this is another one that I think there's a bias in this, that people think they are for two reasons. One is that there's sort of a buzz going around about autoflowers because they originate from ruderalis, which is basically this like tough, short uh, ditchweed, if I may, that is that they have some sort of like strong resistance to pests and maybe mold and disease. And um, from my observation, the answer is no. That again, the physiology is the same. And to argue the point about the ruderalis, there's one thing that I'm going to probably bring up more in the next episode, in this episode, but I'm going to say it now, is that the autoflower plant that we grow today, the ones that we breed and the ones that most other folks are breeding, are not ruderalis plants. They simply are Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, that has the ruderalis autoflowering trait bred into it. Um, and I'm sure there's analogies we could make with humans, as far as like blue eyes is a recessive trait, but you can still have multiple lineages and backgrounds and have blue eyes and not necessarily carry the traits of everybody with blue eyes. And so um, it's it's just a fallacy to assume to claim that that a modern autoflower plant is ruderalis, first of all. And then to answer the second part of my answer, is that they appear to be pest and disease resistant because their turnaround is super fast and they're seeds. So in general, when you grow from seeds, you don't start with pests and disease, which is a really good start compared to clones. And then second is they're a really quick turnaround. So you're not vegging them for 2 months and then flowering them for 2 months. Their whole life is just more than 2 months. So I believe it's a bias. It's a biasy that comes from just appearance. I mean, we have big, thick, chunky autoflowers plants that mold, that still get mites. I mean, I haven't seen any sort of difference in really anything on that level.
Well, that kind of goes into our next question. True or false, are autoflowers faster than photoperiods?
Yes, so I kind of answered that already. The answer is yes and no. There, some autoflowers basically come out of the seed practically flowering, and you read about 60-day autoflowers. I have never seen that. I've bought seeds that claim to be 60-day autoflowers, or I've ran seeds that claim to be 60-day autoflowers that were not. They were 80. I I'm not going to call those people liars. I've never seen that myself. I suppose it's possible. It's awfully fast. But if you are going to get into a 60-day autoflower, you're essentially talking that thing is flowering from a week after it's come out of the seed. So you're not going to get very big plants if you've got a 60-day autoflower. And we're going to talk about that later as well, or the next episode.
All right. So true and false. Are autos less potent because they come from rurales?
Well, I think we can go back to the same kind of answer. Like definitely false. Autos can hit the mid 20s. I'm sure there's some high 20s out there. Uh, there's really very little difference in potency. Uh, the difference is that we can't capture the genetics like you can with photos and cloning, and that's one of the things that makes photos uh, dominant in that way, because it's like you can essentially capture that perfect gene by phenohunting and then store it more or less forever. So yeah, you've got the GMO cut that hits 30%. Well, that was ran from a phenohunt. It was a winner, and it's been captured and duplicated throughout the world now. And you can't do that with autos. Like you have to just breed them again. So you could have a 30%er, but then if you didn't do some really expert or some really lucky breeding and breed it with another 30%er, you might end up dropping that 30 back down to 20. So um, certainly selective breeding is a big part of it, and doing everything you can to work potency and terpenes and size and all these things up. It's a little more of a moving target than it is with photo periods. And we'll talk about that a lot of that in the future questions that'll be about breeding.
All right. One common question that a lot of people seem, or not common question. Let's rephrase that. One common uh, request amongst Autoflower customers, and they seem to always choose the fastest autoflowers. So, in your opinion, are those the best or preferred ones to grow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my opinion, the answer is definitely not, and I think I can back this with some pretty good evidence and lots of experience. So what I call those the hair triggers. So there are autos, again, like the ones I was referring to. They basically come out of the gate flowering. Now, will you get faster flower? Yes. Will you shave maybe 10 days off? Yes. Is it worth it? Not to me. Two reasons. One is you have basically zero leeway for mistakes. So if you have a pH issue, you have any sort of problem with your grow room, it gets too cold one day, one issue, then it could ruin the crop, because if it gets stunted, you just stunted it during its peak growth time, when you only have about, at this point, with those strains, maybe 15 days of solid vegetative growth. It's risky. And those hair triggers, we don't breed for the hair triggers, although we have two strains that are kind of on the verge of that level, where they're really quick turnaround. The plants stay a lot shorter, buds still get big. They don't take up much space. But they're risky. I feel like they're risky plants to grow. They're not preferred. I feel like us putting those out into the community will create more issues than if we try to put the autos that flower after about 20 to 30 days is what we shoot for. So that's from seed emergence, not from dropping it in water, but from when the sprout actually emerges uh, from the seed, or roughly the time that you put it in the soil, um, about 20 days. If they start flowering in 10 days, that's cutting it close for us. So my answer would be no. Now, a lot of auto breeders basically tout their super fast autos, and there's certainly a market for it, and and they'll continue to kind of push the envelope with how quick they can get the turnaround on those. And I think for some people it's got value, but I'll take the 10 days and get the plant 25 to 50% larger in that time, if not 100% larger, double, maybe even triple. So to me, it's worth investing an extra 10 or 20 days and getting 3 times more plant.
Now we have a hardcore autoflower enthusiasts. There are hardcore autoflower naysayers, but there are some people that are on the fence. So for those people, can you give an example of situations where a home grower may find it an advantage to grow autoflowers?
Absolutely. And you kind of touched the surface on this, and I'm sure you could chime in as well. But so a couple things. One, they're small plants, and that's practical for a lot of the world's population. You grow one of our glue sniffers from seed, and you start it in February, and you put it in a big pot or in the ground. We've had local farmers grow 18-foot wide plants here. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it would take up more than people's porches and people's backyards in some cases. So that's not very like practical for a lot of people. Um, if you start an autoflower plant at the same time, it's going to be, you know, the size of your tomato bush. You can squeeze them right into your garden. You can put them on your back porch. They're pretty unassuming. You know, they don't have that giant cannabis plant look to them that your neighbors are that are poking up over your fence and, you know, over your house. So that's I think kind of an all-purpose good reason for a lot of home growers. They're quick and easy. Again, you know, growing from seed is always great because you don't start with pests, and then the quicker turnaround just has less issues with pests. It's less likely that you're going to get bugs and different pathogens and whatnot because of that quick turnaround. Another thing is they're not affected by light pollution. So a lot of people that live in really bright cities or areas with street lights all over the place might have issues with light pollution, and your autos will be just fine. They'll chug right through it like it never happened. Um, and then of course multiple harvests per year. That's a great one. So you know, you can't grow a 16-foot tall and 18-foot wide glue sniffer plant, but you could grow six autoflower plants 2 times a year, or even 3 times a year, and grow 18 medium-sized plants in that same amount of time. So that's another great reason. And then another one I like to throw out to people that are kind of on the fence too. I'm like, hey, do you have extra room in your veg area? Like if you're a photo grower, a lot of times people don't use up all their vegetative area, so you can slip a couple autos in there. It's a good way to test them out and see how you like them, and they'll grow no matter what. And then if you end up needing to put them back in your flower room, that's fine too. I mean, I flower autos at 12 and 12 sometimes when that's all I have, and it works just fine. So they're very versatile.
Are there any examples you can offer where home growers shouldn't choose autoflowers?
Yeah, I guess I could think of a few. One would be if you have really low plant count number in your state, or for legal purposes. Like for instance, if you're only allowed to grow 2 female plants or something, then maybe it would be justifiable to grow that two 18-foot wide glue sniffer plants. You're going to have, you know, huge yields of people around here grow 15, 20-pound plants, single plants. So, you know, maybe get yourself 20 pounds, maybe 30 or whatever of 2 plants. I mean, that's kind of like epic, but it can be done. I've seen it. You're going to yield more than if you have 2 autos 3 times a year. You know, you're never going to get that much. So I would say that would be a pretty big reason. I mean, I'm kind of stumped now because honestly, I can't think of really any other reason besides that.
Well, if you're a control freak and you want to, and you're anal about your canopy, definitely don't choose it. If you like the strain and you're hoping to clone it, don't choose it. There are a few things I think that maybe the hardcore old school growers aren't into and wouldn't embrace. I think let's move on to the other side of that. On the commercial side of things, what about commercial growers? Where and how do autos fit in a commercial cultivation scenario?
Yeah. So, um, you know, I'll be perfectly honest. For indoor, I'm a little perplexed as to why some commercial growers reach out to us for their indoor grows for autoflowers. In fact, I've even asked some of them, and I think, you know, the general answer is I think they're not really experienced growing them, and they kind of fall for that previously mentioned propaganda, like, you know, 60 days, massive plants, you know, uh, they're going for yield, and I I'm not saying my mind can't be changed, but I think for indoor commercial growers, it's very impractical, and growing from clone is by far more practical. Um, for outdoor, I mean, it's huge. It's kind of some of the stuff we touch base on with the home growers, but with outdoor around here, they became really popular or sought after. And after the county started cracking down on permitted greenhouses. And so what happened was the county basically said, oh yeah, all these hoop houses aren't permitted anymore. And so you have to remove them. Well, then people couldn't, they were used to having their light depth hoop houses where they were pulling 2 or 3 crops in the summer, or one full term and maybe, 2 light depth crops. They were that got eliminated from their life. So then they switched to autoflowers, which also in hand requires a heck of a lot less infrastructure and labor, without having to pull tarps, and you generally get about the same size plants and same size canopy, because you're not really growing huge light depth plants typically, because they're turn and burn. So you're switching them over when they're pretty small, like a foot tall or something, maybe 2. So uh, that would be a huge reason, that is a huge reason that the commercial cultivation market's after them. And then of course, just massive fields of cannabis, early season harvests, places where they just can't grow photos at all, high latitude places. And I forgot to mention that in the previous question about home growers, but that might be the number one answer, is that in a lot of latitudes, you just have no other option. Again, back to the guy in Homer, Alaska. So you have no option. That's the only option. I mean, sort of pulling tarps, which is just completely impractical for home growers to go outside and, cover up a plant twice a day. And then for them, put lights on them too. So yeah, that's huge. So grow giant field plants and have harvests 2 a year, and maybe 3. So
I think
those
we
would
have
be,
some terp surprises too along the way, so those fields can definitely be turned into concentrate for sure.
yeah. And I think, we touched base a little bit about the potency, but I want to mention that, I mean, some of these autoflowers, there's really nothing to be scared of. I mean, these things, they smell fabulous, they look fabulous, the terpenes on them are just out of this world. Super potent, super frosty. I mean, there's not really any difference, except for, again, you can't get that identical. You're never going to get the exact same autoflower, just like there's no 2 people on the planet the same. So they're always going to be a little bit different. Hopefully with good breeding, you've got very close relatives. But
So I think this can wrap up the first part of this episode. In part 2 of this episode, we will be discussing autoflower myths from the breeding side of things. So with that, Adam, do you have any final comments for this week?
no, I think, hopefully I opened up some people's opinions a little bit on autoflowers, if they, if the naysayers even wanted to listen in on this one. But give it a try. Again, if you've got some extra space in your dry room, or in your grow room, your bedroom, join the auto race, get some free seeds, and give it a shot.
Yeah, if you're on the fence and definitely wanna give us a shot, I mean, the Great American Auto Race is your best bet. There's not really that much of an investment you need to make. However, I know that there's tons of people who have been salivating at the mouth for these. So everybody, please subscribe to our email list on our website for up-to-date information on any of our drops. And once again, the Great American Auto Race link is in our bio, and also on our website, 2020mendocino.com/autoflowers would be the link for that. So everybody, please make sure to sign up. With that, we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, Sundays at 4:20 on YouTube. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Take care.